As part of the recent Pokemon leaks, a bombshell revelation was made. Within all of the notes and documents from Game Freak that were leaked, there was reportedly a document found that specified plans to include a flying-type Eeveelution in Pokemon Sun and Moon. The design of this Pokemon was not leaked, but according to the document, this Eeveelution was cut because it apparently looked similar to a fan design, and Game Freak basically decided that they would rather not deal with any potential ramifications that could cause as a result. Long story short, this means that there is a flying-type Eeveelution design somewhere within the vaults at Game Freak, and I am going to show you what it might look like. In fact, if there is a flying Eeveelution within Game Freak's vault, then there is a decent chance that there is also at least some concept art or doodles or something of more unseen Eeveelutions as well. So in this video, I am going to be showing you all of these Eeveelutions that you've never seen before and provide a glimpse at what these potential unreleased Eeveelutions might look like. The first type that we're going to look at is obviously flying, because that is where this whole story begins. And without further ado, I would like you to meet Eeveelution. Now, while this cut Eeveelution reportedly already looked similar to another fan design that is already out there, it is hard to say which design that would actually be. And in terms of a ballpark idea of what this scrapped Eeveelution could have looked like, I think Eeveelution is a solid representation. As a flying type that is also based on a mammal, your options are naturally kinda limited in terms of portraying that flying type in a successful way that also feels realistic and natural to the Pokemon's design. So I feel like turning the bigger ears that Eeveelutions often have into makeshift wings like we see here on Eeveelution would be a really natural way to do that. From there, this Pokemon also has a general feather theme going on that feels very possible in terms of the kind of thing that Game Freak's design could have also had. Meanwhile, while the name of what this Eeveelution could have been is about as hard a thing to guess as you could imagine, Eeveelution, coming from aviation, sounds and feels to me like as solid of a guess as any, as I feel like it fits quite well with the Eeveelution naming scheme and just sounds pretty good in general. Outside of the flying type though, there are also 9 other types that an Eeveelution has never used, and that designs of which could very possibly exist somewhere within Game Freak, or at the very least have been explored to some degree. One of those 9 types is Ghost, and this is what a Ghost-type Eeveelution could look like if Game Freak has ever considered such an idea. I have named this Eeveelution Mummyon, and while it's only one route that you could take for a Ghost Eevee, I believe it works really well. The design centers around the name itself, and I feel like Mummyon is as good of a name as you're going to get for a Ghost-type Eeveelution, simply because it fits in perfectly with the Eeveelution naming scheme and has a seamless sound to it that rolls right off the tongue and also sounds cool as well. The Ghost type is one of the most highly requested in terms of which type should get an Eeveelution next, so I feel like there is a very solid chance that Game Freak have at least entertained the idea at some point, and I feel like it would be a fan favorite if it ever came out and ended up looking something like Mummyon. Another very intriguing type for potential Eeveelutions is the normal type, since Eevee is already a normal type itself, and I believe this design is a very solid representation of what an official normal type Eeveelution could legitimately look like. Given that it's the normal type, it can't exactly do anything too crazy in terms of what its design looks like, so more than likely it would probably end up looking quite a lot like Eevee, and appear as a more standard and expected kind of evolution compared to what we normally see out of this Pokemon. This isn't exactly a groundbreaking idea for a normal type evolution, but that's because I think it is most likely what an official version of this Pokemon would look like, and it's just not hard to imagine that that is the direction that they would legitimately take. As far as names go, while again it's basically impossible to guess an exact name, I feel like the name Eeveelution is the most perfect name that you could get for a normal evolution. It sounds great in my opinion, and it describes the idea of this Pokemon perfectly, as being the most like Eevee, but still an evolution. And I genuinely can't imagine there being another name out there that would be more fitting than Eeveelution. So I feel like that is a pretty solid possibility as well. Yet another type that I also find particularly intriguing for an evolution is poison, which might sound a bit strange at first, but there's a good reason for it. And that would be that poison is another type, like flying, that Eevee was going to get an evolution for, but it was scrapped. This happened back in Generation 2, and while we did actually get that poison evolution in the form of Umbreon, its type was changed to Dark in the final games. So since Game Freak has already tried a poison evolution once before, it is very possible that they have revisited the idea again behind closed doors, and Maligneon could be what that might look like. I think if we ever do get a poison evolution, it would probably be a different approach to what they originally tried with the more sleek looking Umbreon, which is why I feel a more shaggy design like this could potentially be an option, especially because the more unkempt look works pretty naturally with the poison type. One thing I also wonder about regarding this is that when they introduced Sylveon, whether they had ever planned to release another evolution alongside it, since evolutions are typically released in pairs or trios, and if that was in fact the case, Poison is actually one of the types that could have been paired alongside Sylveon's Fairy type, since Poison is strong to Fairy, and the types of each group of evolutions typically have an advantage or disadvantage against each other. So while it might not be something as interesting as Ghost or Flying, the Poison type Maligneon is still a very interesting evolution possibility. And if you're enjoying these evolutions, consider checking out my merch store. It's a great way to help make videos like this possible, and we just added these awesome preview packs from the upcoming Histrobi Chronicles TCG. This is a TCG that's going to feature a lot of my Fakemon in a collectible card form, which is just really cool and I'm really excited for it, and these packs were previously just a pre-order bonus with my Narwade plush, but now you can get them all on their own. They're super fun to open and collect, the cards are really high quality, and in every pack you get a special Shrubberus, Embit, or Narwade card that won't be made available anywhere else. You can check it all out and order yours with the link in the description, and again, it helps out a ton and it's super appreciated. Not to mention, it's just really cool. It's honestly something I'm super excited about, so be sure to check it out. And now, let's go ahead and get back to some evolutions. Meanwhile, one type that I feel like isn't discussed as much amongst possible evolutions is Ground. It's not really an exciting or interesting type for Eevee like Ghost or Flying or even Dragon, and it doesn't really provide an interesting scenario like Normal does, for instance. It's kinda just whatever as far as an evolution is concerned, but that does not mean that it couldn't make for an awesome design. This is Therion, and it's actually one of my favorite designs of this bunch, despite being for a less exciting type. By the way, I commissioned my good friend RGreywind for the artwork of all these evolutions you're seeing, and if you would like to check him out, you can do so with the links in the description. With that said though, Therion's name comes from Terra, meaning Earth, and design-wise, it's basically an amalgamation of various desert-like and desert-dwelling creatures, such as the fennec fox and the pangolin. Ground is also another one of those types that you could go in a bunch of different directions with for an Eeveelution, so while it is not exactly easy to make an exact prediction on this one, it also isn't hard to see the amazing potential that a ground type Eeveelution could have. Likewise, a rock-type Eeveelution is another one that is probably on the less exciting side of new Eeveelutions, but that doesn't mean that it wouldn't be amazing. I think the most challenging thing with this kind of Eeveelution would be differentiating it from a potential ground-type Eeveelution, but as Kragyon here shows in comparison to Terrion, it can be done. One thing about this design that I definitely could see happening on an official rock-type Eeveelution is putting rocks around its neck to resemble jewelry. Since Eeveelutions are usually pretty elegant already, a trait like this would be a great way to get the rock type to work on a Pokemon like this, while also feeling like it fits with the Pokemon at the same time. The name Kragyon, coming from Craggy, is also another one of those names that feels like a seamless fit and also sounds great to say, which makes it feel all the more plausible in my opinion as a legitimate option for an Eeveelution. This one would also definitely have to evolve with some kind of stone, because I mean, it's a rock type for crying out loud, and obviously that would fit great with the Eeveelutions as well. Speaking of a good fit though, I think one type that many have questioned how it could ever fit with Eevee is the bug type, because how do you get a mammalian, cat-like Pokemon like Eevee to also look like a bug? It is a bit of a conundrum, to be honest, but that's what makes it one of the most interesting possibilities in terms of new Eeveelutions, and I believe Antenion shows that it could be pulled off, and be pulled off well. With this design, we applied the bug type by basically swapping out the signature big ears that most of the Eeveelutions have and replacing them with a pair of antennas, which is where the name Antenion also comes from. That felt like the most natural way to get some bug traits onto this Pokemon without it feeling too weird or out there. And then from there, a bee coloration was also given to it to help strengthen that idea. Game Freak could go any number of different directions with this one as well, but even if it's not exactly what they might do, I think Antenion shows that a bug Eeveelution could work, and it could work well, so it's definitely something that doesn't have to just sit in the vault forever. One type that is a lot easier to imagine on an Eeveelution though is fighting, and therefore is all the more likely to be sitting in Game Freak's vault somewhere. On top of that, the fact that an Eeveelution like this could potentially have the name Champion is just too good not to have potentially been explored at some point. Champion would genuinely be one of the best Pokemon names ever, in my opinion, if it ever did actually become a real thing. So with how good all of this fits together in terms of a concept, I can definitely see this one having been explored to some extent by Game Freak. It's also another type that could have been paired with Sylveon too, since Fairy is strong against fighting, so that'll always be another possibility for it as well, and honestly, of the unused types that we currently have left, this one feels kinda like one of the easiest ones to pull off, and therefore it feels all the more realistic to actually potentially happen someday. Since we've been bringing up Sylveon though, and the potential types that it could have been paired with, we can't forget about Steel, because it not only would have been able to pair with Sylveon in terms of type effectiveness, but it's also a type, in my opinion, that feels equal parts intriguing and feasible, so it seems like one that is very possible for Game Freak to have already entertained the possibility of behind closed doors. With that said, Titanion is one way that a Steel-type evolution could be portrayed, and I feel like it would most likely come down to one of two possibilities for this potential evolution. It would most likely, in my opinion, go down a more futuristic route like we've done with Titanion here, or a more medieval route. So it would possibly be a battle of past versus future in terms of what the design of this Pokemon would look like, and it would probably end up depending on which idea fit better with whatever game Game Freak wanted to do and was making at that time. So while Titanion is just one possibility of what Game Freak might have been cooking up behind the scenes with a possible Steel-type evolution, it is one that I could see legitimately being possible. And for our last evolution, we have the ever sought after Dragon-type. This is probably the most wanted evolution type at this point, for fairly obvious reasons, and Draconion is what that might look like. I've designed this evolution for this video in particular, but it's also not the first Dragon-type evolution that I've ever done either, and as you can see, there are multiple ways that something like this could happen and work well, despite the somewhat unusual combination of having to put a dragon motif onto a more cat-like creature. Draconion in particular would work great in a more Eastern-inspired region, as it is obviously based on more Eastern-like dragons, and I think how this Pokemon looked would ultimately come down to what region it was featuring in, and would likely take on more Eastern influence like this if it was based in an Eastern region, or it would take on traits of a Western dragon if it was introduced in a Western-inspired region. So I think those would probably be the two major possibilities for an official Dragon-type evolution. And given how cool and wanted this idea is in general, I don't doubt that there could be a sketch or two somewhere hanging around Game Freak's office. So that was a glimpse at potential evolutions that you have never seen before. And now I need to know which one you would want to see introduced next. Let me know in the comments, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I'll see you all with another one soon, and until then, as always, thanks so much for watching this one. I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.